It seems like everyone wants to reminisce about yesterday, wearing rose-tinted glasses. People like to read about history, remember the good old days of dangerous runoff and medium speed sweepers. But history books don't get written by reading them. So in 2012, a brand new Grand Prix circuit was constructed as part of the next chapter of American motorsports. 890 acres of undeveloped land outside of Austin was constructed into a state-of-the-art racing venue, Circuit of the Americas. It's a big name, and it has to be. This place hosts Formula One, and Formula One has a different approach to using the word historic. They don't use it to describe something old. Oh no. Formula One doesn't do the past. They do the future. They look ahead. Toka built this place to be more than a racetrack. It's a multi-million-dollar entertainment facility, built purposefully with computer-aided design. The layout is a world-class thrill, if you're talented enough to learn it. It's not easy, threading through the S's, coaxing your car through the arena section, and finding every blind apex. It's a challenge unlike anything else in America. Shouldn't it be hard? Shouldn't it be tricky? You're not supposed to give everyone a trophy. If you want to be remembered, fine. Go out there and prove yourself. Finding space on the page to write your name in Speed City's history book? Now that's exclusive real estate. Welcome to COTA, gentlemen. Enjoy the ride.
See, it's getting darker and darker, and there's just no way right now for these drivers to know exactly what's going to happen.
These guys are going to have to be really, really careful and tiptoe around the track until it's either and not even 10 minutes into this race, and I feel like we've got enough strategy going on for a whole event, but still a long, long way to go.
There's Yellowstone, there's Yosemite, but for racing fans and for Grid Life's Elkhart Classic, the destination is Road America, the National Park of Speed.
Three wide in the front of the field here. Look at Emil Tab up the inside for the race lead. We head down to the first corner.
These guys have no idea what they're coming into. Look at this field. They're 2 wide, 3 wide, a couple places slipping.
Side by side for the race lead. 54, 48 through 3 and 4. Working lap number 60, 110 laps to go. Yusuf Ghali, power move to the bottom of the racetrack, making the short way work. They're going to touch down the hill. This will be a great run for Fuller here.
Yeah, typically ran off the track in the final quarter. That'll allow Fuller to get a massive.
Here he comes.
Does he have a look?
Oh, big block here by Sanfilippo. Into the grass goes Ben Fuller for turn 1. And Sanfilippo hangs on. He's loose. No! And he crashes hard in the exit of turn number 2. Don't try here, boys. They're going to do it. Gritsko backs out. They touch. They're going to crash. Gritsko going to slam the attenuator hard into the wall. And Tarantassic hits him as well. That's big damage on these cars. That's a huge
number 4. People are struggling for grip, going out of every single lane, trying to then run. It's getting really insane.
Powered by AWS for the Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli at the Indianapolis 8-hour. We are 7 hours and 18 minutes into this 8-hour event. John Miller way deep on the brakes to the inside of turn number 1 and 2. The spin, the 3 car gets turned around in front of the car. James Houghton looking for a place to go, but he's got Austin Cobb to the inside. Bit of a gap behind. I think that's about 15th or 16th spot as they come out of turn 3. Big slide for this. Getting a run. He's got it. Going to be a drag race line. Final corner. Checkered flag waving. Here they come. At Virginia National Raceway. To the line. Thompson, Darling, door-to-door, banging doors, fender to fender. I can't believe what we just saw.
For a long time, Formula One did not race in the United States. It used to go to Watkins Glen and all over the country, but now its home is in Austin, Texas. Welcome to Circuit of the Americas for the GP of the Americas for Formula I's F1 World Championship. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined this afternoon by 4-time winner in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge Series, Tom O'Gorman, for our next round in the series as we come to the end of the year here, Tom. Going to COTA is always a big moment for any driver at any racing level, but for Formula One drivers specifically, this place is really important for your F1 career to win a race in America. This is a big racetrack. It's relatively new, constructed in 2012, and today we race on it for Formula I. This is a track that you've actually competed on before. What are your thoughts on Circuit of the Americas?
Well, it's a lot of fun, and obviously with Formula One cars, the sights and sounds just feel right, even if it is in iRacing in the sim world. But I think the Formula I series kind of adventured a little bit away from the standard Formula One circuits for a couple of weeks, and now we've returned back to a couple of familiar tracks, and there is a sight to behold with climbing the massive journey up into Turn 1 as we watch qualifying 3 here for the Formula I series.
There's Cody Sandwith in number 32, and again, we've already had a couple rounds of qualifying. This is just Q3 as you see Sandwith sweep through the S's here. Such a fast section of racetrack and spectacular to watch these cars race on it. Now you're going to head through turn 8 and 9 up over the crest and then down over the crest of the hill towards the hairpin. We'll go over a track map a little bit later today and have a look at it in more detail. But this racetrack, specifically the first half of it, Tom, is so much fun. The latter half, you could argue, is a little bit pedantic in smaller, lower horsepower cars, but in the Formula One car, this is a perfect racetrack in my mind.
Sure, and it kind of has these split personalities, as you mentioned. The first half of the track from basically the exit of Turn 1 all the way down to that hairpin that we just saw Sandwith exit. That is all basically linking the same corner together. It's heavily transitional, and every corner leads to the next. I believe Lewis Hamilton called it the greatest sequence of corners on the Formula One circuit, or even in the world. I can't remember the exact quote. But then you get a little bit of a break, and then we're into this point and shoot section, what we call the stadium section. And it's one of the best spectator areas. It creates some really fascinating racing, but it is, as you said, maybe a little awkward, a little bit tedious in a race car.
For sure, Sandwith is going to sweep through the carousel. How about 170 through the carousel? That is unbelievable. Now through turn 19 and into turn 20. 19, you have to pinch the car off pretty hard to keep it on the course. There was a slowdown penalty, a little slide for Sandwith as he comes off the corner across the line. A 1:35.935 stays second as Danilo Sanfilippo goes to the top of the board. It looks like Marco Sanfilippo has yet to log a time across the line now, a 34.869. That will put him at the top of the order right in front of Danilo. Other drivers on track, Stephen Grabowski in the 48. Stevenson Oliveira is back in the F1 APS silver car. And he's working his way through 13 now and into that tight stadium section.
Just look how wide you have to set up to get into that corner. It's really tempting to shove your nose down in there if you're in a racing situation. And I think we're going to see that a couple of times today, not just there in turn 15, but also headed down into turn 1, headed down into turn 11. There's a number of places where on entries the corners get really big here, and then they go back to standard width on exits. So it's one of those situations where you think you have a lot more room than you do, and all of a sudden you end up in someone's side pod without really realizing it.
Then the climb up the hill into turn 1. This is a feeling that you really can't get from the simulator. I stood over there a couple months ago for World Challenge and looked down towards the start-finish line. Truly a sight to behold, this climb up the hill. And then down through turn 2 into my favorite part of the racetrack, the S's. This is such a spectacular set of corners. We've already mentioned it, but I just can't get over how fun it really is to bring an F1 car around these corners. Let's have a look at the circuit map actually while we're doing this here, Tom, and take me through a lap. In a Formula One car, what would that look like? With inputs and what it looks like around this 3.45 mile racetrack.
Well, it's a heck of a lot faster than I've ever been around here personally, but on the far right of your screen, that's the start straightaway. The start finish line is really close to turn 20, but you get that giant climb up into turn 1, continues to climb all the way to the track out point and then starts to fall away, so it rises a lot longer than you think. Then you sweep down into turn 1, and then turns 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 all influence each other. As you can see, each one is a little bit different than the last, each one a little bit longer than the last as well. So you really have to stay ahead of the car, really utilize the downforce in these Formula One cars through that section. And you get a little bit of a breather, the hairpin at 11, and one of those passing opportunities where the track gets really wide on entry. Narrows up on exit, kind of tough to keep the car on the track, honestly. Then the long back straightaway, definitely going to be drafting down into turn 12. And then the stadium section, you see 13, 14, 15. They're kind of mirror images of each other. Up to 170 miles an hour, sweeping through the carousel at 16, 17, and 18. Flick the car through 19, try to keep it into the track limits, and then the final corner at turn 20, another one of the slowest corners on the track.
This is a track that I really didn't appreciate fully until I visited it in the real world. It's not something that you really run a lot in the simulator. It's not very popular in the simulator, but I don't know why it isn't, Tom. It's really fun to drive. It takes a little while to get used to. It's definitely a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Challenging racetrack, but it's... What's the word I'm looking for? It's every section flows from one to the next, and if you screw up one, it's just going to ruin the rest of that whole sector. So you have to be very precise around this entire place to really make it feel good. So at the top of the order, no surprise to see the Sanfilippos up there, both in the 34s right now. Cody Sandwith just outside in his Furlick team car. And his teammate Luca Furlick in 5th right now, working through the carousel with 36.6, about 1.7 off the Sanfilippo's at the moment.
Just see how fast that entry is off the carousel. Get the car all the way back to the right if you can. Chuck it in for turn 19. And I agree, it's kind of one of those tracks that has personality, but it's kind of an awkward personality. Maybe the kid that's a little odd in school, but when you get to know him, he's actually really cool.
Me?
Maybe both of us. But it's one of those tracks that you maybe also have to experience in real life, and I think it also has some hurdles to jump because it is in the middle of nowhere. There's not a major amount of scenery. It doesn't have the iconic clout that maybe a Spa or a Silverstone do. So it's kind of a hidden gem. Right?
Really is. I love this shot coming down turn number 10. You see the viewing tower, the observation deck in the background. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the top of that and climb it. Whoa, there's a car off. I think that was Alberto Gonzalez Rodriguez. Yes, in the HIT team car. Let's have a look how he found himself over there. Just got loose on the exit and found himself in the Armco. That's a big hit there, Tom. A lot of elevation and rises and crests here, and when you do that in a very high-powered rear-wheel drive car, super easy to get the back end upset and send the car around.
Well, that's a really interesting demonstration of a real-world incident that happens as well, because there's a giant bump as you come out. Maybe we can hop on board with this driver as he comes through turns 7, 8, 9 into 10. So this is 2 corners before that incident just happened. You have a really, really long setup. Right here is where the car starts to spin, but there's also a giant bump there, and you may not see it necessarily on camera, but if you watch real F1 in real life, you'll remember it broke Sebastian Vettel's suspension when he hit that bump and just sent the car spearing off in the race. So, I think it was in the race, but that big bump makes that exit of the S's even more challenging and makes it even more critical that you get set up for it, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about this particular racetrack in the iRacing service is that this is actually pretty much as constructed Circuit of the Americas. See, there's a lot of AstroTurf. That has all been essentially removed in favor of painted concrete. It was really hard to maintain that. And so this track is essentially as it was originally paved. So in the service, it's actually quite smooth, but in real life, it's got a ton of bumps and undulation that are not captured here because they formed after the track was laser scanned. So you won't have the bumps upset the cars quite as much in the simulator, but they still might exist. And I think it's still conscious to keep your car on the pavement instead of on the turf. I think that might be your bigger competitor today is the lack of grip that turf gives you and pulls away from your slick tires. So qualifying is complete. Your pole sitter for the GP of the Americas is Danilo Sanfilippo. Marco Sanfilippo sharing that front row in the Fratelli Capone Corsa cars. Cody Sandwith is going to start on row 2 alongside Bruno Canovis in the number 23 in 4th. Luca Furlick, Alberto Gonzalez Rodriguez 5th and 6th. Then Corey Whiting, Carlos Couteau, Steverson Oliveira, Stephen Grabowski, and Jason Siemens will start. Looks like he joined, was an extra driver here, but again, he's an administrator that's going to set the grid here for our GP of the Americas in just a little bit. Canovis going to come across the line to finish out his qualifying effort. Can he go better than a 1:36.1? He does a 1:35.961, but it's not enough to jump him up any spots.
Interesting to see the Sanfilippo's actually flip spots there in the final minutes of Q3. So Danilo picks up about a 1/10 of a second to go to the pole, but they're still separated by less than a 1/10 there at the top. Then it's a little bit of a gap. Cody Sandwith is pretty comfortable there in 3rd, but then a number of cars between Canovis, Furlick, and Rodriguez. That's going to be a heck of a battle for 4th. Potentially, it becomes a battle for the podium with any sort of dropout from the top 3.
Yeah, of course, it's sort of very much like Formula One right now in that you can pretty much expect the Fratelli Capone Corsa drivers to be up on the front row, and it's really just who's battling for the 3rd step on the podium, just like it is in the real world. Cody Sandwith, Luca Furlick have been trading back and forth there. Bruno Canovis is plenty fast to get that spot. We're going to all have to fight and deal with it here in a little bit. We're going to see how many drivers show up here today and how far back the battles will go, but Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo will start on our pole for our GP of the Americas in just a few minutes. We'll be right back for the event. Welcome back live to Sim TV and the Formula I F1 World Championship. It's time for Austin, Texas and Circuit of the Americas, a 34-lap event at the 3.4-mile road course in Austin, Texas. My name's Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman for our next event in the championship. 34 laps around COTA, 15 drivers gridding up for this one, Tom. Oh boy, turn one, lap one is always a battle and a struggle, but I think the San Filippo's out in the front row are going to have a pretty clear view up over the crest.
Yeah, it's really the mid-pack battles that I think will get really interesting early on, and that's always one of the challenges here at COTA is getting single file by about this point on the track. We're looking at the exit of turn 2. Just as you get to the bridge for entering the S's, turn 3, it's really critical there to be single file by the time you get to all of this stuff, because if you go side by side through here, not only are you hemorrhaging time to the cars in front and behind, but you're also really risking running into some of those yellow curb at the apexes and kind of putting yourself out of control. So I think the key is staying clean through turn 1, but also getting single file by the time you cross under that Patron bridge.
Well, you mentioned the yellow curbing, and I wanted to point that out because it's sort of a big deal here. Basically, what you're talking about are these yellow anti-cut curbs, and they keep you from cutting the racetrack, but they're sort of designed for like GT cars. They're pretty tall, and they will absolutely launch any kind of Formula car airborne and a very long way for that matter. So if you're driving today and you see a yellow thing on the ground, avoid it at all costs because it will send you airborne and into space. So avoid those with every bit of effort that you can have. But the other thing is you want to kind of clip them just a tiny bit with your tire because it might help the car rotate if you're struggling with understeer. Again, open setups here. You can play with the setups. A lot of drivers have sized them out already. So we're in a warm-up period right now before our 34-lap event. Having a look at the weather information, which we just saw a moment ago, pretty moderate temperatures here for Austin. Very low humidity today as well, but 70 in the air, 73 on the racetrack. Typically, COTA's really hot, means a very slick racetrack today. That doesn't really look to be the case, so it should be pretty grippy out there.
No, these guys definitely looked out, and this is pretty much real-world temps right now here in December in the U.S. That's what you would be seeing down in the great state of Texas. Whoa, big spin coming up over turn 10. Looks like that's going to be a problem spot for a couple of drivers as they get tires into that AstroTurf. Luckily, keeps it off the wall this time around, but that's going to be really tricky. Steven Grabowski gets going again in warm-up.
By goes one of the Sanfilippos very, very quickly. That was Marco Sanfilippo in the number 13 for Capone Corsa team car. Again, with the kind of salmon off-red color that he and who's the other Sanfilippo? Danilo. I'm blanking already. I'm having a rough morning. I didn't sleep too great last night, if you can't tell. So Marco and Danilo Sanfilippo on the front row, as we mentioned before. Circuit of the Americas, we talked about 34 laps, pit stops here, Tom. The pit road entrance is right on the inside of turn number 20, just off to the right-hand side of your screen. And then the pit exit leads you up towards turn number 1. It's a great opportunity if you're trying to pull an undercut strategy and pull out in front of somebody. It's a great opportunity to sort of block their run down to the apex, so you can get pretty racy and pretty competitive coming out of the pits and rejoining traffic.
Yeah, it certainly is. You can also tell from this shot a couple of notes. First of all, look how wide the track gets on the entry. That's what I was talking about in qualifying. You can see it down at the bottom of your screen. It adds about 3 car lengths to it on the way in and then pinches right back down to standard width. But also, in the context of pit stops, but also in wheel-to-wheel racing in general, the corner actually has quite a bit of camber to it. It really helps you maintain speed not only as you rise the hill, but as you go through that apex. So you can slingshot around the outside, especially if you get a little brave using the track limits on the exit. I don't know how enforced the track limits in this series are. I would suspect not particularly outside of iRacing's own standards, but there's the other spot that the track gets really wide. There's 3 of them. This is the second of 3. This is down at the end of the back straight into turn 12. See, you could probably park 10 F1 cars side by side going in, but then it goes down back to about 6 or 7 car widths on the exit. There's the exit there.
The warm-up is almost complete here at Circuit of the Americas, and I love this place. I mentioned earlier that I was never really a huge fan, but then I went and saw it in person and really kind of fell in love with it. It's a really neat place. As we get prepared for our 34-lap event, looking forward in this series, the next event is going to be a couple of weeks from now. That will be at Imola in a few weeks. And then we'll round out the season on January 2nd at Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps in Belgium. That's we got 3 very famous Formula One tracks coming up after we went to Detroit and Bathurst, 2 tracks which are a little bit unorthodox for a Formula One machine. So qualifying is complete, so is the warm-up, and now we're ready to set up the grid for our 34-lap event. Again, you're watching Sim TV. The next thing coming up will be tomorrow afternoon, GT World Challenge America Esports from Monza at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central. It'll be myself and Ryan Marine for that race. And then Monday night, it'll be the return of the Three-Wide Racing League heading to their next event, which, looking at my schedule, looks to be Phoenix. Excuse me, on Monday. And then on Wednesday, it'll be the return of the, well, you got FCP Euro Challenge Tour on Tuesday. So, got a lot of stuff coming up. I'm doing not so great today, Tom. As we set up for the race here in just a second. 34 laps. We've got our drivers lined up. Danilo Sanfilippo is the pole sitter for this race. Your grid is rolling along the bottom of your screen very briefly. And the run up to turn 1 is always frantic, whether you're on a standing start or a rolling start here. But now, it's time to get moving here. Row number 2, row 3, row 4. Time to go racing in the GP of the Americas in Formula I's F1 World Championship. Here we go from Circuit of the Americas. Green flag flies, and we're racing in Texas.
Great start from the 5th position. I don't know the driver, but he's already up to 3rd, dives into the back of the Sanfilippo. It's a bump at the apex, and he gets turned. That is Sandwith, I think, from 3rd, gets turned around at the apex of turn 1.
It is Sandwith. That is, and he actually ran into the back of his teammate, Luca Furlick. So contact between the teammates in the early going. Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo make their way through the S's so far. Severson Oliveira and Stephen Grabowski went side by side for a moment through the S's. Now they've cleaned it back up, but drama early for Sandwith in the 32, making contact with his teammate, Tom. A disastrous start.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate for Sandwith, and it looks like he might have actually already called it as he's being listed as out.
No, he's on the racetrack.
He is on the racetrack. Okay, good. But Furlick, the opposite, that was a heck of a start from 5th, got a great hole shot off the line, and is clinging onto the back of Marco Sanfilippo pretty well. Down a little bit further, they did a really good job of getting single file before those S's, as we talked about, and most of the field has already started to string itself out.
Getting room to race. This is a racetrack that you can really race the track as much as you can race the other drivers on it. And you're going to see, look at Grabowski having a look at Severson Oliveira. A bit of a lockup into turn number 12. Got that left front tire dragged across the surface. You're going to be playing with the brakes quite a bit here, especially in this tighter section. These cars are so lightweight that if you use too much brake pressure, you're just going to slide the tires.
Grabowski's still looking really racy on the back of Oliveira. Whoa, then the back end starts to step out. Potentially a cut penalty as he slowed way off the pace and let a driver go back by. But he was looking racy for a couple of corners. Now Jason Siemens moves up into the top 10, having started 11th. And pretty big gaps between most of the field at this point. Now what I'm really curious to see is at the front, whether the Sanfilippos do much working together or if they race each other throughout the entire duration of this race.
Through turns 1 and 2, Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo come across the line. Don Day is here in the number 4 car. He's behind Cody Sandwith. Sandwith trying to get his racing machine back going in the right direction after that turn 1 spin. And Carlos Couteau in the 22, that's the white coat F1 team car, running in 7th. Trying to run down his teammate, Corey Whiting, in 6th in the number 12 car. As they come on through and head down towards the hairpin once more. Saw the left front tire start to lock up, but Danilo backed off the brake pressure quite a bit. And the downforce in these cars will peel away as you slow the car down. Again, it increases with the squares every time that you double the speed. So as you reduce your speed, Tom, all that aerodynamic downforce reduces as well. And it means you're just going to be sliding those tires. As I mentioned, the slower you go, the easier it is to lock up the tires.
Well, yeah, that's something that people don't necessarily consider very often is the aerodynamic effects with the brakes and how much you have to adjust for your braking as you lose that downforce. You know, you can stop the car really, really quickly when you're going close to 200 miles an hour, closing in on turn 12. But then as you're, dropping under 100 down to 70, 60 miles an hour for the apex of turn 12, all of a sudden you're almost at no downforce at all. So you really have to adjust your brake pressure through the entire duration. And in the real world anyway, I don't know how much these guys do it in the simulator, but in the real world, you'll see the drivers dialing brake pressure and brake balance per corner around the laps. As the Sanfilippos start to pull away a little bit, Furlick's got company though. Canovis is keeping the pressure on.
Bruno Canovis chasing up the tailpipes of the 06 of Luca Furlick into turn number 1 and heads down the hill now for F1 APS Red. He is the lone F1 APS Red teammate here today as he heads on through the S's, left, right again. And this is such a rhythmic section. You see a little bit behind there, a little bit behind Furlick in chasing the apexes, and that meant that he kind of compromised the entrance to some of the other corners.
use all the curbing at the apex 8 there, and then try to straighten out turn 9 as much as possible, using a little bit more of the track out at turn 9 than Furlick in front. But I do think actually Canovas was running a little bit more of a GT line.
That's Jason Siemens is way off the pace, and I don't know if he had an issue, but he just slowed down drastically, and I don't know why. He just backed off and dropped a bunch of positions, and it's still rolling now, but I don't know if there was an issue or something, but he's back in 13th.
We're dropping almost all the way to the last spot.
His teammate got by him. That's Patrick Woodstruck, who started 13th, running 12th now, and that spot he gained was the spot that his teammate pulled over and let him have.
A little further up the road, Sandwith's already up to 11th, knocking on the door of the top 10, and we're going to watch his charge in the 32 all the way through this field, I suspect, over the remaining 40-so minutes of this race. He's got a long time to get there, but I don't know that he'll actually make it all the way back to his teammates. He's kind of got to pull a heroic move and really put in qualifying effort laps all the way to the end of this race.
I had thought that he locked up, but it was actually smoke from someone else in front of him. So Sandwith continues his charge. His last lap time was a 1:38.450. That was quicker than everybody in front of him all the way up till 5th. So he's going to be coming forward, and this is going to be the driver to watch all day long. Take
a note of those lap times, though. This is something that's always fascinating to me in Formula One, both in real life but also here in the sim. Those lap times, 1:38, that's almost 4 seconds off of the pole time in qualifying. And he was only about a second off of that pole time, so that's 3 seconds off of his fastest that he's done from qualifying. When you add fuel to these cars and you really have to manage the tires for race pace, they slow down significantly. And if you ever get a chance to go to a Formula 1 race in real life, the session to watch, if you can only watch one, is qualifying.
Steven Grabowski, another spin. It has been a troublesome moment as Sandwith runs way out wide to miss him. Grabowski has really had trouble with the top of the hill coming up over over turn 8 and 9 here, Tom. Just too much power.
Looks like he's catching the curb on the inside, and when the car loads up the right side outside corner, it just goes for a spin. And we've seen him do it at least once in warm-up, now once during the race. But they're side by side down to turn 12. Sandwith going for a position. Well, they touch on the turn-in point, a little bit of a grab on the wing, and that's going to push him wide at 12.
That's Silvio Brizola that he went around. Brizola's going to get back around him in 13, run a little bit wide here, but Sandwith, his charge is not done yet. He'll have to try again into 14 and 15. Had it complete. There's the lockup, and that's been Brizola that's been struggling to get the car woed down. And back up to pace again through the carousel.
Yeah, a bit unnecessary of a touch between the two of them. Sandwith had every chance to just stay in line. Tried to shut the door on the way into 12, and unfortunately it didn't pay off. Looks like a little bit of damage to the front wing on Brizola's car, but now that makes it a couple of extra corners before Sandwith is going to get by this driver, and every moment counts as he's been on the back foot this entire race.
Up into turn number 1. Here comes Sandwith up the inside on the brakes. Brizola's going to cut down to the apex, and Sandwith clobbers the inside curb and kills momentum coming up off the corner. You can't get power down when your car is bouncing like a pogo stick.
Yeah, there's a lot of effort going on in Sandwith's car, but not a lot of strategy. I don't think if he would be a little more intentional with where he's trying to make his moves, I think he could make this pass pretty easily, but he's trying everything he can, desperately almost, and it's kind of hurting him at this point because that entry to turn 1 really hurt him. See, he's got a couple of car widths to get back to Brizola, and he's clearly quicker. He gets there every time, but he just needs to be a little more patient, a little more calculated with how he makes the effort. This will be a good run, though.
Yeah, great run out of turn number 11, and going to be in the slipstream here for the long back straightaway, running all the way down to turn 12 and into the DRS zone. We don't have DRS in these cars, so it's going to be all slipstream. Here he comes, driver's left, going to try the same move again into 12.
He's in line this time, but not very aggressive on the brakes. Brizola holds it on the outside into the stadium section once more on lap 5 of 34. Let's see just how the over-unders through this section really help. Brizola runs a fairly defensive line into turn 15. More lockups, so he's going to have a completely square left front by the end of this race.
And again, we saw Brizola sort of pinching off Sandwith just a little bit on corner entry to 12. Oh, that was a big drive into turn number 19 for Sandwith. Carried so much more speed. Look at how much he gains on the brakes.
I think there's probably a lot of time to be had in these cars, specifically on the brakes. And if I had to guess, that probably makes the difference between a 5th and a 15th place driver here in this series. Then it's down to other places on the track. Whoa, big lockup for Brizola. Did he go wide? He did. So Sandwith is through and now into the top 10. That's 9th. For the 32 car, and he sets his sights forward. That's a big gap to gain, though.
There's a look at it again, off into turn one. Just drives in, a little bit late to the apex, and just drove in too hard and too fast and locked up those left front tires. Will fall in behind Sandwith now as he drives up the road about a second.
And Oliveira is the next car in his sights, but there's a big gap, 7 seconds between the 30 of Oliveira and the 32 of Sandwith, so that's going to be a while before that battle comes to. The battle that hasn't seemed to be going anywhere is Furlick and Canovis for third.
And we bring in Alberto Gonzalez Rodriguez in this mix. He's relatively new to the series in that 14 car, running in fifth spot right now. Relatively new to the series, but has sort of made a pretty big splash on his entrance to it. Started 6th, running 5th right now, but right about to catch Bruno Canovis through turn 15.
It's a big lunge into 15, locks the tires up, and you can just see how that affects the run out of the stadium section. Now sweeping through this really, really fast, pretty iconic carousel. Tried to replicate a little bit of the Istanbul quadruple apex turn 8 with a 3 apex turn 16, 17, and 18. But a couple laps ago, I noticed on the timing board, Furlick and Canovis were only separated by about a tenth or two. Now that battle has fizzled, and if anything, Rodriguez is getting closer to the back of Canovis.
Yeah, it seems like he's dropped off just a little bit. Last time by, Furlick ran a 37.5, which was a half a second better than Bruno Canovis. Gonzalez Rodriguez ran a 38.0 as well, so that puts Rodriguez and Canovis on pretty much the same pace. Also, don't count out Carlos Couteau. He's actually gotten by his teammate Corey Whiting and is running at 37.8, which is 0.2 faster than the two cars in front of him. He's coming for a top 5. And into turn 11, and getting this corner squared off and the run down the back straightaway is so important because it leads into probably your second best passing opportunity. But this one is so hard because if you don't complete it here, Tom, the next couple corners are a pair of right-handers before a very sharp left. So you better be fully prepared and committed to drive in here, make the pass, and then defend going into 13.
Yeah, it may not be the driver's favorite section from turns 12 to 15, but it's absolutely the coolest section of a racetrack, as far as I'm concerned, here at Circuit of the Americas, because if you come into turn 12 at the end of the back straight kind of even, it's really anybody's game with how much you can over, under, and hold outsides, insides through this stadium section. And there will always be, for the most part at least, a clear winner by the time you get to turn 16 entering this carousel. Look at Couteau closing up on the back of Rodriguez. That was a really good run through the stadium section this time, or potentially Rodriguez made a mistake as he's dropped now 2 seconds off the back of Canovis. Yes, it looks like Rodriguez is struggling.
Yeah, big struggle there, and maybe you get lit up those rear tires. Here comes Couteau on the front straightaway across the line. Gonzalez Rodriguez leads across the line that time, but Couteau up the inside for turn number 1. A little bit hot for the 14. Can he chase down to the apex? He does, and throttles up and drives away into turn 2.
That's a good, well held around the outside. It eats a lot of curb on the apex at 2, and Rodriguez will continue to lead into the S's on lap 8. It's going to be a lot of aero wash for Couteau. He's probably going to drop back just a little bit as the front of that car is not going to want to turn so well once he's tucked up underneath the rear of the 14 just in front. Now, see, he's not able to turn the car quite as much as he would have liked there at turn 8, and then his run out of turn 9 suffers.
I love watching these cars sort of chase each other through because these cars are so pointable that you can sort of change your direction mid-corner if you want to get out of that aero wash. Gonzalez Rodriguez is driving a little bit sloppy right now. You saw him kind of come out over the edge of the curbing way early, exiting turn 11, Tom. That just tells me that there is some blood in the water for Couteau to go sniff.
Yeah, he did the same thing at 20 last time through, turn 20. So it looks like he's struggling to get that car in to the corners. There, once again, he just can't get the car stopped, and now Couteau gets to go to the outside. It is possible to hold the outside around 13, but it's tough. He makes it happen as Rodriguez backs out of that one. Looks like he kind of waved the white flag and will try to fight another day.
Yeah, it was a little slow to get back on the throttle, so I think that was half intentional there. Corey Whiting trying to close in as the White Coat F1 driver split the HIT team car in that number 14. Again, he's all by himself here today. Jason Siemens is a lap down, but got back rolling after that mysterious slowdown he had earlier. It must have been just a slowdown cut penalty. We didn't go back enough to look. But up towards the front, Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo following each other about a half a second apart. This is about where the aero wash starts to affect you on these cars, Tom. Do you think Marco might be able to outrun Danilo in this one, or do you think he's going to be stuck back here unless Danilo makes a mistake?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see how much these drivers are leaving in the tank, and I think, I missed last week at Bathurst. I haven't been here for most of the season, side by side, and that's going to be Whiting through on Rodriguez, back for 6th.
Nicely done for Whiting, and there's more battles going on into turn 1. Grabowski up the inside of Woodstrup. That'll be a battle for 11th. Actually, I think Woodstrup is going around Grabowski. Oh, they're going to battle side by side through turn 2. This is not a place where you want to be running, side pod to side pod with another competitor.
No, it's really tight. You kind of have to be single file by the time you get to these S's. And Grabowski is on his charge back through the field after that early spin in this section.
Gonzalez Rodriguez is around and spun out. And I wonder if this was a spin coming out of turn 11 for too much throttle right here. Yeah, just maybe shifted a gear and just punched the car around and into the Armco.
Yeah, that went around really quick. And I think we had been observing that Rodriguez had been a little bit ragged for the last couple of laps. I'm not surprised to see the car finally got away from him because he was trying really, really hard to keep up with those cars that had started to eat him up just a little bit. But back at the front, what I was going to say is 2 weeks ago, at least at Belle Isle, what I also observed in the short races, pretty sure if memory serves that it was Danilo that was kind of the car on pace. He was on pole for both races. But mid-race, Marco really surged and started to pull back, and he's been doing that as well just this race. The widest gap that I've seen so far is about 1.2, 1.3 seconds. And Marco in second place, the car we're watching now, has brought it back down to about 6 or 7 tenths. And there's a little bit of a slip from Danilo in the front spot, runs wide, exiting 6. And now that gap is down to less than half a second.
That was a big moment for Danilo Sanfilippo. I'd like to go back and actually have a look at that real quick as he came on through. Let's go and look at it a little.
Caught the curb.
Yeah, caught the curbing there. That was a big moment for Danilo. And here comes Marco now within 0.4 of a second. That slipstream distance here, Tom.
And the question for me is how much they're leaving in the tank, how much they're going to race each other this early, because they are teammates and they have over a third of the race to go. We're on lap 10 of 34. So there's still pit stops in the making. There's still a lot of race to go. And I don't know that it makes sense for them to battle much right now as so much as does to just continue to run in formation. That said, they do have an 11-second buffer to third.
These guys are just phenomenal. They're so good at what they do. Meanwhile, for third place, Luca Furlick and Bruno Canovas, real deep charge into turn 12. Might have gained a little bit of ground there, but could have lost it on exit. That's a sacrifice I think he was willing to make as he begins to reel in that 06 car again.
These cars haven't been much more than a second apart on the track this entire distance. Looks like Canovas is running a little bit tighter and tidier lines, but Furlick rolling more speed for the most part anyway. He's going to extend that gap back up just a little bit coming through the carousel. These two have a long way to go. If anything, they're hoping that the Sanfilippo start to race each other.
Ooh, behind them, I think that was Carlos. No, that was actually Bruno. No, it was Carlos Couto or Jason Siemens a lap down. And one of the things we should mention about turn number 19 is it's actually unique on this track as we have a look at Siemens' replay here a moment ago. This track is unique in that this area right here, that's an off track. You can't, well, it's an off track and a slowdown, I should mention. You get a slowdown penalty for running wide in turn 19 if you go beyond the turf. And Siemens will find that out and will have to give up some time. So if you're battling for position like Furlick and Canovas are right now, do not run wide at the exit of 19. Furlick gains on the exit of 10. Canovas, so there's a car slow on the inside. That looks to be Don Day who's letting the leaders on by. Pull over, and Alberto Gonzalez Rodriguez is out of this race officially. Don Day getting back rolling. Going a lap down now for the lead, though. Still a half a second between these two. You said that they shouldn't battle. I'm going to disagree just because of how far ahead they are. I mean, I wouldn't battle to the point where you think they're going to crash, but I think they're good to trade positions for now.
Yeah, I agree with that. They're pretty safe to race each other freely, but I do still wonder if there's any sort of plan coming into these races that they stay out of each other's hair for the most part towards the end. I know that I've had situations like that when I race with friends or teammates, but it is more fun to just kind of go at each other. And I hope for our sake, at least, that we do get to see that happen. It looks like Danilo in the lead, shaking the car back and forth just a little bit, maybe feeling something out. It is possible, you know, we saw him grab that big curb at the apex of turn 5 in the S's a couple of laps ago. That car may not be as happy as it did when it started this race, and it's pretty easy to damage not only the suspension but the underbody of these cars, the flat floor of these cars when you grab a curb like that.
I actually wanted to have a look at the side pod of this car. This looks like that's correct, and that's not out of shape or anything, but the damage could have been done up underneath. And we already mentioned the yellow anti-cut curbs. And they are sharp, and the problem is you can ramp them if you catch them with the tires, but if you drive over them, you're actually going to catch the underside of the chassis on it and basically rip parts and components out. So that for Danilo, that's the concern, is did he damage the aerodynamic underbody of that floor, and is that going to hurt his lap times? Last time by, he was faster than his teammate. That might not be consistent for long.
Whiting grabbing the curb just as we were talking about it to demonstrate exactly what we were talking about. And looking back just a little bit further from that, the 32 of Sandwith is continuing to charge, is now within 5 seconds of Oliveira in the 7th spot. So that gap has come down from 14 or so seconds to about 5. But it looks like it's stabilized there for the most part, as he's not made much progress in the last couple laps.
Yeah, his last lap was a 1:38.3 for Stevenson Oliveira. It was a 1:38.1, so a little slower actually for Sam with the previous lap. For the top spot, though, it's now 0.3 of a second. Marco is right there.
I really suspect that the 27 is not a happy race car right now, and if anything, he's better off to not defend too much because he might be able to run a little bit quicker if he's behind. I don't know, the strategy is this one's tough because when you're forced to make a decision this early in the race, there's still so many options that it's tough to decide which one might be right. But I think Marco Sanfilippo right now is right on board into the S's on lap 12, I think. I think that's the stronger race car.
On lap 13 at the moment, 35 minutes to go in this race. I don't know why it ticked back over to time, but it's lap number 13 as we come through turn 8 and 9. And I was just watching Marco's line through there. It's so precise, and he backs it up a little bit and carries more speed through the center, whereas Danilo seems to drive in harder and kind of straight line the first segment and then really slow it down for the second segment. That's a really interesting way of differentiating. I tend to kind of chuck the car in there the way Danilo is, but I've seen a lot of people back it up successfully and really string together some sequences. Here comes Marco, though, closing in even further, 2 car lengths between the leaders.
Looks like the 27 of Danilo in the lead had a big push at the apex of 11 as well, so it is possible to maintain the lead that he's had, that he maybe worked the tires a little harder than his teammate behind. Ooh, big speed for the 13 into turn 15. The gap is maintaining right about that half second. I think you're right. I think that's about where the buffer for the aero wall is. When you start to get that aero wash at about a half a second distance, it's really tough to make a move without a mistake.
Through 19, or a little bit wider for Sanfilippo. Marco is driving tidier right now, I think, but Danilo still a hair quicker. You see him pull away. Great run onto the front straightaway there. 9th place, though, Silvio Brazola and Steven Grabowski battling for position. This is heading down towards turn number 12.
When Grabowski pops, he's going to have the inside line into turn 12, and he basically straight lines to the apex and easily gets the position on the way in. Brazola tries the crossover, but is not going to get it done this time through. But now Grabowski's really wide onto the AstroTurf. No grip out there. Gets away with it, but now Brazola's got a little bit of a run back to turn 15 and will stay on to the back rain light of the 48.
As it straightened back out again, oh, big gain through the carousel. Now the push, the aero push, shoves that car sideways for 3rd place. Luca Furlick and Bruno Canovas battling for P3, and this is why Circuit of the Americas is one of the best racetracks on the Formula One circuit.
Still hasn't gotten to be about more than a second. I do wonder, I don't know how much practice necessarily or how much detail work goes into the pit stops for these drivers, but I think this might be one of those battles that comes down to the pit stop because it's basically a wash coming in and out. If they can gain any amount of time, tenths, let alone seconds, in the pit stop between the two. The other question, I think, is potentially with the strategy going into this race, Canovas might be able to hit a little bit earlier, get into some clean air, put in a fast lap or two, and pass Furlick on the track. Because I bet right now he's got a little bit of an aero wash and is having a hard time getting close.
We'll keep an eye on the Canovas and Furlick battle. Having a look at a driver we have not talked about yet today, that is Charlie Bass in the number 94 car for TNT Racing. He started in 14th. The progress has been very slow, but he's knocking on the door of a top 10 as Brazola struggles in front of him.
Leaves to break the draft, but the 94 is absolutely within drafting distance. He's not going to be within striking distance this time quite, but he will be getting closer and closer. It looks like Brazola is struggling with that car a bit. We saw a big push. Whoa, Bass with a massive overshoot on the brakes. I don't know that he's come in. Oh,
that's a big crash for Stevenson Oliveira, missing the whole nose of that car for F1 APS Silver. He's the only representative from that team here today. And let's have a look at how he got himself in this situation. It was coming out of the carousel.
I'm going to bet he grabs curb on the outside here. Tracking out of 19. No, just loses it under load. And unfortunately goes into the right side wall. Luckily, he's just before pit in at this point, so he can just kind of whip the car around and head straight to the pits. But that was an odd-looking thing, and that might be an indication of things to come for other drivers, is potentially tire wear starting to take effect here into the later part of this first stint.
Danilo Sanfilippo and Marco Sanfilippo, 7/10 separated. Oliveira resets back to the pits. Donde Gonzalez and Oliveira all out of the race. Charlie Bass is off the racetrack now. That is at the exit of turn 1.
Maybe a bit of commentator's curse going on there, as we hadn't talked about him, and as soon as we cut to him, he's made 2 mistakes in the less than 1 lap, but this is coming out of turn 1, down to turn 2. Whoa, gets on the power too much and floats off to the left. Does a great job of keeping it off the wall, so he'll get to fight another day, but looks like he has struggled with a little bit of rhythm here on this lap.
Oh, big closer for Marco Sanfilippo into turn number 20. He's been flirting with getting around Danilo, and one well-timed run into a good passing zone I think will mean that we'll see a lead change here shortly. It's less than a half a second back. I do think, I mean, if you look at the lap times, you'd think Danilo's quicker, but Marco is just in position at opportune moments and just hasn't been able to strike just yet.
I really think it's important for Marco in the second spot to pit before Danilo. I think he wants to pit at least 1 lap early, try to get a clean run in clean air, I should say. Just 1 lap in clean air, I think, might be enough for that 13 car to pull up to and maybe around 27.
Oh, trouble for Brazola in the number 7. He's found his way into the Armco now. See if it's a similar situation, too much throttle. This might tell me about the tire wear that we're seeing today. Just a little bit too much. Unlocked the wheels and just scraped the Armco.
Probably safe as far as damage goes, but these cars are definitely a handful right now for everybody. We've seen a number of drivers, 3 separate drivers in the last lap have gotten away or have had the car get away from them on corner exits.
You can count Brazola out of the GP of the Americas. He is done for the day. Oliveira will likely be, unless he can get that car repaired. Jason Siemens' lap down. That leaves us with 10 drivers on the lead lap. Right now, 2 competing for the lead. Then 13.2 seconds back to find Luca Furlick and Bruno Canovis, who remain about a second apart. And Carlos Couteau, Corey Whiting, the White Coat F1 team that's 5th and 6th. Good to see the teammates running nose to tail there in P5 and 6. They end up in 1 and 2.
Those teammates have swapped spots in the race. Whiting started in front of Couteau, but now it looks like Whiting is on a little bit of a run. Big flick into turn 15 for Couteau in the front, but Whiting has been coming back towards the back end of Couteau. So I think we basically have 3 pairs of drivers, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and every time the faster car from behind gets up to the back bumper, they kind of hit that arrow wall. And I think all 3 of them need to consider pitting before the car in front to get a clean lap and try to bring that gap a little bit further closer. Further closer?
Further closer.
I don't know.
For the top spot, still 0.4 of a second. I just want to keep an eye on this because with Danilo struggling through the S's, there's always the potential that he makes that mistake. Again, a big wiggle there. That's going to be an opportunity for Marco, but he was not ready to pounce and didn't gain any time. Drag race down the backstretch now, but these cars are so even, likely running almost identical setups. Again, teammates generally prefer slightly different things from their cars. And the beauty of this versus the experience that you have racing in IMSA, Tom, is that you don't have to make a concession with your teammate. You don't have to share it. You can do it how you want to do it.
Sure, all the team racing I've done has been in the same car rather than against my teammates in similar cars, so it's a little bit of a different situation. Ooh, another big wiggle for Danilo. That's the biggest mistake we've seen him make, and now the gap comes down big time, 0.3 of a second between the 2, and I think the 27 is starting to show that tire wear as well. We are in a really mission-critical phase of the race because we're just pre-pit stop. Look, and Danilo dives to the pit lane, is going to have none of that tire wear, and decides to call it on the first stint of this race. This is going to get interesting.
So I want to point your attention to the lap times. Look, we're 2 seconds off pace from where we were at the start. I mean, typically, when the tire wear isn't a big concern, you're more worried about the weight of the fuel, and you actually get faster throughout a run. Not so today. We're getting way slower. This is like watching NASCAR with the tire fall off we're seeing. So that means it should be a gain for Danilo Sanfilippo to pit early, and might be a loss for Marco. However, if you wait longer, you could do the overcut strategy, which is always a risk, Tom, but it could work today.
Well, this is really interesting. Look at the leaderboard right now. All 3 of the 1st, 3rd, and 5th place cars, the drivers that were leading their individual battles, all pit this lap. The drivers that were following all stayed out this lap. So this is really important for the drivers who stayed out to get the best lap of their lives right now to try to close that gap just a little bit. On the flip side, it's important for the drivers who have been leading each respective battle to get a really clean out lap, as now Sanfilippo is back out. Just behind, that's going to be Furlick and Couteau starting to exit the pit lane as well.
So 8.1 seconds in the pit lane and 32.3 seconds spent in the lane itself. I'm curious to see if Marco will respond to this lap or if he's going to try to do something more similar to an overcut and run a lot longer and hopefully use those better tires at the end of the race. I don't know, Tom. Every time I'm behind a driver, the aero wash is going to negate any tire advantage for me. I think you want to come and respond quickly and hope that you can get a faster stop.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's no point in staying out any longer than one lap right now. We'll see if Marco goes with that strategy. No, he stays out. That's really interesting. But we saw how bad the back end of that car looked. Another big wiggle at 18. Coming out of 15, he was basically leaving 11s coming off of that corner. So I really don't think the 13 is particularly quick at this point, but every lap that he completes right now, he's buying himself fresher tires at the end of the race. So it's not a terrible move, but it is an interesting one.
Down the hill into turn 2, yeah, I don't think it's the wrong move necessarily. I'm surprised that that's the route he took.
Yeah.
But again, they perplex me, and they've won almost every race this season. So maybe I shouldn't be questioning them.
I mean, just to explore that further, basically right now he's got two lap fresher tires at the end of the race than Danilo. So right now Danilo's got to put in some really fast laps on fresh tires. But if it comes down to a battle between the two, Marco is almost certainly going to have a faster car at the end. And if he's comfortable with the way the car is right now, it may not be particularly fast, but if he's comfortable with controlling it, then it's not a bad move.
Well, here's my problem here, Tom. 32 seconds on pit lane for Danilo Sanfilippo. Right now, the lead is 29.4 from Marco to Danilo. So if Marco has an identical pit stop, he's back 3 seconds. I don't know. I don't like this as much as I thought it was okay before. I think Marco might have just lost this race by not coming in with his teammate.
Looks like a little further back, all of the other drivers that were in the top 6 battles have pitted. So Furlick and Couteau pit. And then the next lap, Canovas and Whiting responded. There were no changes between the two, but the battles are close as ever between all of those drivers. And then we go back to Stephen Grabowski, who has not yet pitted, and he's moved all the way up to 7th in front of Sandwich.
Patrick Woodstrup has also not made a pit stop just yet. But everyone else, besides Marco, has made a pit stop. And now Marco Sanfilippo hits pit lane. If you're going to do it, stick with it, Tom. I think now he's sort of made his bet, and he's going to have to lay in it. Let's just see what the stop length is. If he beats 30 seconds, I think he's got a chance, but that's hard to do and get enough fuel in it to make it to the end. Into the box, here we go. Got to be a quick one. Where's Danilo coming out of turn 20 right now? Marco firing off. That was a short stop, didn't even record the time, but now he drives away. Here comes Danilo, and Marco Sanfilippo is actually going to leapfrog his teammate. Did he get enough fuel in the car there, Tom?
He runs a little bit wide. So just confirming they do refueling?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like real Formula One. That means
yeah,
Marco
correct.
Sanfilippo has somehow leapfrogged Danilo, and he will have fresher tires as well. So whatever circumstance in the pit lane allowed that to happen, it looks like the strategy that we were calling not terrible but interesting has turned out to be very good and interesting.
Yeah, I want to reserve that until the very end of the race. I'll give him credit as soon as the checkered flag falls. He's going to pull over and try to break the draft, but Danilo's going to close right back up. Here he comes. Is there a slowdown maybe for Marco? What happened? He's going to tuck right back in line. Does he might not have took enough fuel. He's got a slipstream here, Tom.
He's either that or had a cut penalty somewhere on the outlap there.
Yeah, it was too perfect. He waited for not very long and just jumped right in behind his teammate. I think he's getting in behind to slipstream. I don't think he took enough fuel. Either that or there is team orders at play here, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, if that is the case, we're all speculating here in the booth, but that is a really high-risk, high-reward kind of strategy to short fuel the car, fuel save towards the end, and hope that your fresher tires are enough to pull yourself back up to the back bumper, not only just keep up with, but also pass your teammate who has proven to be the fastest car in this entire race.
Coming to 14 laps to go now, and they're going to run nose to tail out of turn number 20. And the problem is that Marco has to save a lot of fuel. I don't think he's going to be able to stay close enough to save enough fuel to make it to the end. Again, I have no idea if he's how close he is or if he's not even close at all. Big drive up into turn 1. Missed the apex by a mile. This is not looking good for Marco.
That's the kind of stuff that you can't do if you're on a high-risk strategy. Back a little ways, all the battles have fizzled because of the pit stops, unfortunately. So Sandwich is still trying to claw his way back towards the front after that early mistake. The battles for 3rd and 5th have both fizzled. So this battle for the lead is not only the most important as far as standings go, but still the most interesting with the strategy that's going into it.
Saw Danilo run way wide at the exit at turn 10 there. That was worrying for a moment. The car bobbled just a bit. He caught it and carried on. Marco a little wide again. He's not been so precise since he came back on the racetrack. I wonder how much that is the fuel that he did take. Is that weight going to mess with your mindset a little bit, Tom? Does that change the handling of the car enough to start making you miss apexes?
Well, for first, I'm curious to hear if he lifts out. It didn't seem like he was rolling out of the throttle particularly early there. So if he's fuel saving, he's not doing it super aggressively. But to answer your question, yes, you certainly have to do a reset mentally on those pit stops, because if you're refueling the car, you're making it significantly heavier by percentage of these very light Formula One cars, but also adding new tires and giving yourself kind of a 30-second ice from being on track. It's basically a fresh race, so you can't just go back out and start working off the marks that you had been doing. You certainly can't go out and go as fast as you had been going, but you do have to be very careful with that, and this is really a critical, most risky portion of the race on those first couple of out laps.
Watch Danilo's line through the carousel, and he went 3 lanes wider than I thought he was going to run. I wonder if that's to carry momentum or avoid a slightly bumpy double right-hander, kind of double apex corner there. He might have done that to avoid the bumps, Tom. He might have done it because you can carry more speed out there. With the downforce of an F1 car, it almost doesn't matter where on the line you run.
Danilo really behind through the S's. I think Marco's closed up just a bit through that section. If anything, Marco needs to make the pass before the S's, because that's his strong section, and then he can start to gap Danilo whenever that pass may or may not happen. The gap comes down to less than half a second, 3/10 almost by the time they hit the brakes for turn 11. I don't know that Marco's doing much fuel saving.
It's very weird to jump back in behind it. Why wouldn't you spend an extra half a second on pit lane? Or maybe that was accidental. Maybe he didn't want to jump out in front of him, but I don't see why that would have been the case. Perplexing to say the least. But we're coming to 12 laps to go next time by. We're getting down the tail end of this race. No other major battles to speak of on the racetrack. Luca Furlick has put himself in third. Cody Sandwith sits 8 seconds back from Corey Whiting. And this was the big missed opportunity for me today, Tom. Sandwith had an amazing start and then threw it away all within about 200 yards. Shot up from the kind of the third starting position up into a pretty good spot, and then ended up kind of rear-ending his teammate and dropping out of the order.
Yeah, it was his teammate that really had the great start. And unfortunately, I think with his teammate's great start, it put Sandwith in kind of an awkward spot. Bumped his rear bumper on the got into the transmission, I guess.
The transmission
is a better way to say that in these cars, and got turned. There is the teammate running with a comfortable gap now, almost 3 seconds between Furlick and Canovis, which is by far the biggest gap we've seen them have so far.
Still the closest battle is the one for the race lead. As we head into the S's now, left, right, left again. And a little tighter. I like Marco's line through here. He was a little bit neater. He's been like this the whole race. He's tucking a little bit tighter to the apexes. Danilo's giving himself some more room. I would just wonder how much that's going to affect the tire wear, how much Danilo's just chucking it into the S's. Danilo's just looked a little frantic today.
Yeah, Danilo running really wide at the apex of 11, completely misses the hairpin onto the back straightaway, and this is going to allow Marco to close up big time under the draft. Watch the time tumble from about 5/10 now almost to 4/10.
Oh, big lift
You're
there.
right. Yep,
yeah.
there it is. All right, so the fuel saving is confirmed in the 13 car. I think we will not see him get particularly aggressive until the last couple of laps. 12 laps to go, so we still have almost a third of this race under to go. Marco running wide now.
Through the carousel again. Still a half a second back. Now, again, being behind a teammate like this is kind of a double-edged sword. One, you get the advantage of the slipstream, which will save you fuel. The other is the fact that you're always fighting against aero wash. You're probably wasting your right and left front tires on dragging them across the surface because you don't have any aero grip. So it's a kind of a win-lose situation. Not really sure that benefits you in any way, really.
And that's why I call this high risk, high reward. Danilo running wide again. I honestly think both of these drivers are having their struggles. They're pretty severe struggles, and they're probably lucky that the other is having similar struggles, even though they might be, different in circumstance. But this is that tighter line. Look at how much neater Marco is through this S's section. That's absolutely the line that I would be trying to drive if I were in this car. It looks very neat. It's, for whatever reason, not closing him up very well to Danilo at this point in the race, but I think that is mostly by design, as, again, we're probably going to hear him coast for a moment.
so much.
little bit.
I was going to say, if this is the struggle bus, Tom, I want to be on it. They're crushing everybody by 15 seconds. But between each other, they are definitely more frantic looking this week than we've seen them in the past. I mean, I'd love to be on the struggle bus 15 seconds ahead of third place.
It's very true.
Maybe if I was a bit more like Tom O'Gorman, a bit of a lockup there for the left front for Danilo. Into turn 13. 5 car lengths, make it 4. Another big slide for Marco. I think this is going to, or for Danilo rather, I think this is going to hurt his tires. And coming to 10 laps to go, I think I put the advantage on Marco's shoulder if the fuel doesn't become a bigger concern.
Definitely agree with that. And remember that the tires on the 27 car in the lead are 2 laps older than the tires on the 13. So not only is Danilo driving harder, but the tires are older already. A big wiggle exiting turn 19. And that's going to allow Marco to close up about a 10th.
Watch this as they came through turn, maybe it was a bit of the curb clobber there, but through turn 19, gets out wide. Watch this catch. That's at 150 miles an hour. That was a great catch for Danilo. Clouds have come over the speedway now, and looking at the weather information, the track temp has actually raised up about 5 degrees from where we started. I wonder if the clouds will cool it back down just a little bit. Another major battles to speak of with 10 laps to go here. About 30 miles left in this race, and they're going to click by very, very quickly.
This is a very tense situation for both of these drivers because I don't think that either of them are on a particularly intentional strategy. And if they are, I'm fascinated to know how they came to this conclusion. But I think that this is definitely a mano-a-mano battle. It's not necessarily planned or coordinated between the two drivers, and that's what makes it so tense right now. Although Danilo has put in a good lap and a half, bought himself more distance, but now there's the struggle. He's having a hard time on the brakes. It looks like the front of that car is just not very happy getting into the faster corners with the longer braking zones.
Danilo and Marco continue to chase each other. Still the only battle on the racetrack that we should be watching right now. Jason Siemens is also off the racetrack and out. The attrition level hasn't been super high today. 4 drivers are out of the race. Jason Siemens still on pit lane, but certainly a lower attrition rate than we saw at Belle Isle, for example. But it's COTA. It's hard to hit things, but in a Formula One car, all that runoff room that you think exists, it goes away real fast. People always say that this place has like infinite runoff, and yeah, a lot of it's pavement, but Tom, there's not a lot of space to go if you crash in an F1 car. You eat that up pretty quick at 180.
It's true, but I think today what we've seen, if anything, will more lock up for Danilo in the lead and brought Marco back to it. But what we've seen today is just drivers losing the rear end under a corner exit and going into the wall, having lost control, spinning off to the inside. So that's where the walls are not necessarily accounted for having a lot of runoff, and those are the contacts we've seen.
On corner exit, especially coming up over the crest of this next corner. Use up all the curbing on the right, then sweep back to the left, crest, then down the hill, quick moment in compression, and then now you're back straight, heading towards the hairpin here on turn 11. Big gain for Marco in the braking zone here, now onto the back straight, heading towards 12.
Didn't pay off for him. I think he was in a little too deep and actually lost time this time. So he's kind of flirting with being right on the edge of dropping too far back, in my opinion. He needs to keep that under about 3/4 of a second to get maximum benefit from the draft, especially if he's still fuel saving. I'm sure that he grabs a ton of curb at the apex of 12, and that is not good for the car either. But I think he's probably watching his relative screen or his fuel strategy screen very, very closely. And once he hits the point where he knows he can go, I think we're going to see the 13 car get very, very racy.
Heading through the carousel now, 150, 160, 170 now through the sustained right-hander, then back to the right, sweep to the left. Danilo is avoiding that curbing on the exit, or excuse me, the apex of turn 19. Marco's been straddling it, Tom. That is a corner that, to me, feels like it just feels like it needs a little bit more camber to it, or a less tight radius. It's such a compromising corner, and for Marco to be kind of cutting it a little bit stronger, I think that's going to be a pretty good advantage that he's got over Danilo in the last couple laps.
Yeah, there's a couple sections that the 13 car in second is quicker, and that's certainly one of them. I agree. It's kind of one of those corners that is always a little bit slower than you want it to be. You want to chuck it in there. You want to flow a bunch of speed through, but you kind of can't, especially knowing in this iRacing service that you absolutely can't go out onto the runoff very much. But the good lap from Danilo last time through has not worked very well, and Marco pulled it right back in, which tells me Marco's got a very strong car under him right now. Danilo making fewer mistakes than he had been a couple of laps ago. But I still think the 13, I'm curious to hear if he does another fuel coast at this point, because at some point that's got to flip over to either he is going to make it or he's not.
I have to also wonder if that lift we heard was him just staying out of his teammates. He's still lifting early, but he could be sort of blending the braking there, Tom. Maybe he's got a lot of bias cranked in the rear, and he's kind of getting on the brakes early to stabilize the car on entry. I mean, that's a thing he could be doing too, but it doesn't outright seem like he's totally saving fuel right now. It's sort of nebulous for me right now.
Yeah, I think whatever he's doing, he's not being very aggressive with it, which tells me that he's comfortable. He looks like he's very in control of the car, and I think he's under control of the race. As I say that, though, he grabs way too much curve on the entry to 16 at the beginning of the carousel, runs very wide, and loses a bunch of time. And now they're going to deal with some lap traffic, which is not usually a big deal in this series. The traffic pulls apart aside very, very quickly and makes it easy for them to drive through.
Patrick Woodstrup going a lap down, his teammate already out of the race, so not an amazing day for the Siemens Privateer team. 7 laps to go for the race leaders into turn 1. Danilo and Marco still chasing each other. Danilo out front has led, of the 28 we've completed so far, 24 laps. Marco Sanfilippo has led 3. Those were the 3 that he was out front on the pit stop sequence for. They have led between themselves all 28 laps that we've run.
Battle I'm watching has come closer in the last couple of laps is for third. Furlick and Canovis were separated by about 3 seconds plus a couple of laps ago, call it 5 laps ago, and now Canovis has started to put in a couple of good laps, put it back down to 1.5 seconds between those two. So I don't think third is totally locked up, but I don't know that either of them are necessarily going to make big swings unless a mistake comes into play. But Canovis has got some good laps.
Last time by was 4/10 better than Luca Furlick, so yeah, let's keep an eye on this one as we get closer to the end of the race. 3/10 between the leaders still. I don't know if this is going to be, I mean, they could shock me in one corner. Marco just finds himself in front of Danilo, but they've been nose to tail like this for 27 laps. I don't know. Do you think that he's going to be able to get around him? I think, would he made his move by now? Well, we say that, Cody Sandwith is in pit lane.
Yeah, maybe
let's go back and see.
Maybe a misfire on the pit stop or potentially an incident on track. That's going to be.
He just pulled on down there.
Drove it in. Interesting. I do wonder maybe he messed up something on the previous pit stop. Has to try again.
No, he won't. It's going to be done for the day. So he pulls into the box, calls it quits. That's a frustrating day for Sandwith. 6 laps to go. Keeping an eye still on Furlick and Canovis. Want to see what their lap times are this time through as well. It does look like Canovis is closing that gap even more.
It's down to 1.3 seconds or so.
A 10th and a half gain. Kind of a shallow entry there for Furlick. Tell me about turn 1 here at COTA just a little bit. We talked quite a bit about how the entrance opens up. Do you find yourself kind of taking a wide entry to this, or do you not use all the track on driver's right and kind of enter sort of towards the middle a little bit?
Well, it depends on the strengths and weaknesses of your car when you're by yourself, but it also depends on the racing situation. If you cut back to that camera, you'll see just how much camber there is on the way in. It's a much higher rise on the outside than it is on the inside, so when you do a shallow entry, you get much less help by the terrain, and that camber continues to sweep around the corner all the way to the track out point. If you could see all of the exit point, you would see the highest point of the turn 1 is actually on the exit all the way out on track right. So if you want a little bit more help coming into the corner, you want a little bit more camber, you stay hard outside. Typically a good compromise right down the center is what you would do in a flyer situation. But you can make all of those lines work, which makes turns 1 here so interesting. Look at that wiggle at the third apex of the carousel for Danilo Sanfilippo. To answer your question from about a minute ago, I think when and if Marco decides he wants to pass Danilo, I think he will be able to, and pretty quickly. I don't know why he would be holding off this late unless he's still not confident in his fuel, but there's every indication that the 13 car that sits second is the faster race car.
And he was last time by only 1/100th of a second, but 100th of a second is 100th of a second, and they go by quick here. Through the S's now, 5 laps to go. Let's watch the line again. Marco has been so much better through this particular section. Look at Danilo chasing the car around a little bit. Marco just so composed.
This has been the other corner that Marco tends to set up a little bit better. Uses a little more curb at the exit of 8. Oh, big wiggle exiting 9, but no harm in it. The gap is extended out to about 6/10. Danilo's really cleaned himself up, was making a lot of mistakes about 4 or 5 laps ago. Is now looking much tidier. So if anything, he's going to make me eat my words about the 13 being the better race car. Perhaps Danilo's left a little bit in the tanks or rallied mentally to make sure that he keeps this in P1.
Well, if he just went by laps led, I mean, Danilo obviously looks like the better driver today, but if you look at how they've been driving the car, I'd say that Marco has been a bit more composed and a bit less erratic out there on the racetrack, but it hasn't really corresponded with running position. They don't give you trophies for how clean your lap looked, Tom. They give you trophies for who was out front at the end of the race.
Battle for third is under a second now. Look at that. Furlick and Canovis. I think this is going to be a really good battle for the last 5 laps here for the final podium spot. So we've got 2 good battles on the track. One's a little bit intriguing. We don't really know all of what's going on in the helmets of the San Filipos, but this one looks to be just a good heads-up battle that's coming to. Honestly, it looks like it's coming to Canovis until that moment.
Wow, that was a big catch for Canovis, and he's been about a half a second a lap faster, and that is the difference that I think you need to get a pass done here, even following in the aero wash. I think if you're a half second faster around this place, you can get the pass done, but he's going to run out of time. 4 laps to go this time through.
Yeah, remember the last maybe 3 laps, 4 laps before the pit stop started to happen at the midpoint of this race was the hairiest time for these cars. They're coming back into that phase now, and I do wonder, that brings us back to the lead battle. The 13 car has 2 laps fresher tires. If anything, though, it looks like Danilo has really turned on the afterburners and has pulled that gap back out to 7/10 of a second right now.
I wonder if that was a bit of a plan, too. Danilo is good enough to sort of strategize. If I let him if I let Marco tail me right now, he's going to try really hard to get by, waste the tires and waste the fuel, and then I could just turn on the afterburners and drive away when his car's all tired out. So like the boy who cried wolf, but the boy who cried slow. And Danilo looked like he might be operating that strategy today.
I don't know. The body language didn't say that to me when we were watching the way they were driving the cars, and that comes back to what you had just said. The yo-yoing here is also very interesting. It grew in the S's, which is the section Marco tended to be quicker on, and now it's shrunk back down. Whoa, listen to the tires. You hear the big tires shove across the surface on the way into the carousel. That's a section we hadn't seen cars really get hairy. I think these cars are going to be a big handful for the last 3 laps now as they come across the start-finish line, starting 3 laps to go.
Danilo, you saw him run a little bit wide at the turn 20 curb, and as soon as the tire came back onto the asphalt, it just shot up and went like a rocket ship on corner exit. 3 laps to go this time through the final 4 minutes of racing here in the Formula I F1 World Championship. 2 races left after this week. Imola and Spa to round out this year-long battle. But Danilo and Marco have been the class of the field almost every week this year, and they continue to do so today as they chase each other around like a cat amongst the pigeons, as Ryan Marine would say. Oh, big curb clobber there for Marco. That's going to be a big hit for him as he's lost some time after this curb strike right here. That was a big one, Tom.
And just after we cut away, he had a huge tank slapper. Stay on this for just a second. Watch this. He back and gets away and almost loses it both directions before gathering it up. That was an incredible save for Marco Sanfilippo, and it looks like it might have lost him a little bit of time. Yes, 2/10 or so.
Oh, man. Corey Whiting, sorry to interrupt you, Tom. He's looped it. This is at the exit, I think, turn 1. Go back and have a look at how he found himself in that predicament. On his own.
Looks to be another one of those situations where as he's getting the power down, the car just shoots to the inside. There it is. These cars snap really quickly. Unfortunately, he's not able to keep it out of the wall, as the driver that made the same mistake earlier, Bass, was able to.
Yeah, they're a curious car, this one. This is not yet on the V7 tire model, Tom, so when you spin up those rear tires, it'll just spin around and kill you. There's no, it's really hard to drive like Marco Sanfilippo did at the exit at turn 9, and that's why that was so impressive to me as we hit 2 laps to go.
Yeah, the difference between grip and slip happens really, really quickly. It's almost an on-off switch on this older tire model. The majority of the cars in the iRacing service are updated, and that blends much better together. Look at Marco trying to put the power down, a little bit of opposite lock on the exit of turn 1. Danilo in the lead was deep into turn 1. 2 laps to go, and it's not looking like Marco's got what we thought he might have.
He tried to turn up the wick, Tom, and the car doesn't have anything left to give now, and I just wonder how much tire he spent trying to chase down Danilo, but it didn't look desperate before, and Danilo looked desperate, and now that's sort of the roles have been reversed here, where Marco is driving the heck out of his car, and Danilo is looking very smooth. Look at the dive into turn 11, though, both of them off the apex just a touch.
I think we potentially might be seeing Marco turn that light switch from save to attack, as he's gained 4/10 of a second in the first half of this lap. He's now within the drafting distance, and he's closed that up really, really quickly. This is really intriguing.
Lap and a half left to go here at Circuit of the Americas. Marco Sanfilippo back by half a second. Can he close the gap? Oh, big straight line braking for Danilo. You want to kind of brake in a straight line coming off that, and you're sort of taking a wider entry than you normally would, just because the corner's so tight, and you can't turn and brake at the same time in these cars. It has to be so square. And now coming to the white flag, half a second, a little bit less than that now between the two teammates. Here they come. It'll be a brawl to the checkers. White flag one more time around Circuit of the Americas.
That was a fantastic third sector of that lap for Marco Sanfilippo, and I do think he's got more in the tank left. He rallied, or he dropped back for a second, but now is absolutely within striking distance. The question is now getting around. We haven't seen that yet. We've seen them back and forth, yo-yoing on pace, but we haven't seen any sort of actual racing between the two of them this entire race. He was so fast through this section last time, but he's in that tricky aero wash.
Yeah, he actually sort of messed up turn one a little bit, turned in just a touch early, got the curbing, and wasn't able to get back on throttle quickly enough, so he lost some time, hit the curb there. That might have done it, Tom. That's a big slip for him. And Marco Sanfilippo with one curb hit, I think, has taken himself out of the battle for the win.
Couldn't agree more. I think that was what sealed the deal, and now Danilo can focus forward on the last half of this lap. Gets the breather down the back straight. He'll check the mirrors, see the distance is over a second, and go deep breath and be able to focus towards that checkered flag.
Down the long back straightaway, undulating over the Austin landscape. And into the braking zone for turn 12 for Danilo. It's been 33 laps of absolutely well, I shouldn't say absolutely no mistakes, but minor mistakes. And he cannot make a big one at this point. Still 9/10 of a second. Marco is there if something goes wrong. Danilo's only got one sector left. Through the carousel for the final time. Danilo Sanfilippo started on pole, fought off his teammate. After the pit stop, they swapped positions. We still don't know why, but Danilo and Marco Sanfilippo were going to come home 1-2. Danilo Sanfilippo is going to come take the checkers. Marco in second by 0.3 of a second. The teammates sweep the front two spots. Luca Furlick is going to hang on to third as well, with Bruno Canovis behind him in fourth. Bruno could not keep the afterburners lit long enough to go up there and grab the podium. Fifth place, Carlos Couteau in the 22, the White Coat F1 team car. He and teammate Corey Whiting, another good solid showing for them, 5th and 6th. They swap spots. Couteau a little bit quicker than the teammate today. And Whiting, I wonder if he's going to let his teammate on by, but no, it doesn't look like he's going to do that. Takes the checkered flag. And now Corey Whiting a little ways back. He's still in the arena section, but man, what a drive for the front two, Tom. Pretty unbelievable what they're able to do to finish 20 seconds ahead of the third place car.
Yeah, kept us on the edge of our seats for the entire distance, had us perplexed multiple times through that race, and I was just observing the distance at the finish line. Remember, it was 1.2 seconds coming onto the back straight. Marco Sanfilippo was absolutely flying on that last lap. Other than the mistake, I think we really would have had a race. But unfortunately, that's all it took. And Danilo Sanfilippo takes the win. Absolutely well earned in the 27. And Luca Furlick kept the pressure by Bruno Canovis at bay the entire race distance and brings it home third.
In fourth place, Canovis and Couteau will be 4th and 5th, and Corey Whiting, Grabowski, Charlie Bass, Patrick Woodstrup, Cody Samwith in 9th and 10th. And then moving on back to the last couple finishers, some disappointing days for some of the drivers towards the tail of the field. They're going to get another chance to redeem themselves on the 19th. That'll be at Imola for a penultimate race of the season. Thanks so much for watching here on Sim TV. We'll see you next time.